the Antigonids had done it once more. In a stunning victory, Demetrios and Antigonos had managed to seize the jewel of the empire of Ptolemy, the island of Cyprus. Thereafter, they crowned themselves kings, leaving aside all pretensions of protecting Alexander's lineage. Following this, the other Diadochi all decided to do the same. These kings sought to be Alexander in Alexander's place and secure their own domains for the future of their dynasties. All bets were now off, as these titans of antiquity would clash in the seas of the Mediterranean. The Fourth War of the Diadochi had lasted far longer than anyone originally anticipated, and its climactic battle was about to occur on a tiny isle which up until now had been trying to stay neutral, the island of Rhodes. After assuming his title as Saviour God and now King of Asia, the young Demetrios will now assume his most well-known title, Polioketes, the Besieger of Cities. Welcome to our 7th video on the Wars of the Diadochi, focusing on the Battle of Rhodes. Speaking of ancient history, our Hoplotape plushie is now available to buy and will only be available for 10 days. You can support us and show the world you're a true Kings and Generals fan by clicking the link in the description and pinned comment. Thanks for supporting us. The city of Rhodes was both a suitable and an unorthodox target for the Antigonids to go after. According to Diadochi, it was a very stable and prosperous polis, which was a very important benefit in a very unstable world. This meant that all of the various Diadochi wished to gain control over this rich hub. However, the Rhodians themselves were reluctant to pick a side, and it was in their economic interest to be friends with all but allied with none. With that said, the Rhodians did show slight favour to their biggest trading partner, the Ptolemies. This meant they were prone to avoid open alliances with their enemies, which is why they had denied assistance to Demetrios for the Battle of Salamis in our previous episode. Demetrios thus wanted to take control of this vital nexus point, and by doing so, gain more leverage against Ptolemy. By taking control of the island that was the gateway to the Aegean, and establishing a base of operations upon it, he could dominate the eastern Mediterranean. It was thus a pragmatic choice, though it would cost him in infamy, as attacking the neutral mercantile city made him look like a common pirate to most of the Hellenic city-states. At the port of Lorima, the Antigonid army began assembling under Demetrios. 200 warships were amassed, many pimped up with artillery machines. Additionally, 170 supply ships were loaded up for the over 40,000 troops enlisted to besiege the island city. Diadochi claims, perhaps spuriously, that 1,000 smaller pirate ships gathered up behind the Antigonid fleet, waiting like vultures to take advantage of the destruction of Rhodes. Some of these pirates were hired by Demetrios to serve as light raiders. With his army gathered, Demetrios set sail for Rhodes. When news of this reached the Rhodians, they assembled 6,000 of their citizens, 10,000 metics, and an unidentified number of their enslaved population. Their defense force assembled, there was nothing to do but wait until the Antigonid army appeared. When Demetrios' navy arrived upon the island, they blockaded the port of Rhodes completely, while his troops made landfall in the southwest plains. After this, Demetrios sent the pirates to conduct raids across the island, to both irritate and cause damage to the Rhodian population. The Rhodians tried to negotiate at first, but these attempts at diplomacy were fruitless, so they resolved to fight. In a bold move, 3 Rhodian ships broke out from their well-fortified harbour, sank a few of the Antigonid ships, and dashed back to their harbour triumphant. Rhodian craftsmanship had already shown itself to be invaluable. The blockade was never fully successful, as Ptolemaic-funded supplies continued to enter Rhodes, meaning that Rhodes was not alone in its hour of need. The diplomatic connections of the Rhodians further paid off when they sent envoys to Cassander and Lysimachos. Doubling down on the blockade, Demetrios built another harbour alongside a wave breaker to make sure his ships would be secure. Moreover, he loaded up his smaller ships with small artillery and Cretan archers for quick attacks on the Rhodians. He then constructed 2 big platforms on top of 4 warships, united in 2 pairs, and then put his catapults on top of said platforms. He did the same with siege towers on top of platforms strapped on supply ships, thereby building a mobile amphibious siege arsenal. The Rhodians responded by mounting their own artillery on their ships, harbour, walls and mole. With the preparations and the standoff completed, and after bad weather thwarted an initial attack, the battle officially began. Demetrios began his assault at nightfall by sending 500 men to drive at the mole before establishing a beachhead. Leaving 400 men to secure control of the site, he waited until the next morning and then towed his large artillery-mounted ships into the harbour and commenced a projectile assault. The Rhodians weathered this storm with great heroism, returning fire with stubborn resistance. Rhodes suffered heavy losses, but they withstood for the duration of the assault. The Antigonids eventually withdrew, and the Rhodians tried to chase after them and burn the retreating armada, but to no avail. Soon Demetrios regrouped his forces, turned back, and recommenced his assault. This time, through the use of amphibious landings, they established a foothold on the walls. However, the Antigonid forces were eventually repulsed once more. The following week was quiet, as the Rhodians buried their dead, and Demetrios regrouped and reorganized his forces. Demetrios' next move was to escalate the pressure on the defenders with a two-pronged strategy. He took his light ships, full of archers, moved them into close proximity to the defenders' base, and then began to shoot flaming projectiles at the defenders on the Rhodian ships. This was meant to burn the enemy ships and cripple their naval defences. Simultaneously, Demetrios ordered the catapults and artillery to attack the walls, while striking at the enemies on the front ramparts. Soon the walls began to break down, like those of Jericho in the Hebrew Bible, but the sailors on the ships managed to save their vessels from being completely burned. The fate of Rhodes now teetered on a knife's edge, so the defenders resorted to desperate tactics. They took two of their light vessels and made a suicide run towards the siege engine warships, managing to ram and destroy the enemy vessels, sacrificing themselves for the future of their polis, a noble deed equal to that of the 300. However, two engines managed to escape, while the remaining Rhodians were surrounded and captured. Nevertheless, this attack was ultimately successful, for it did enough damage to force Demetrios to retreat. Shortly after, a fierce storm churned up, giving the Rhodians even more breathing room. Consequently, they moved down the mole and destroyed the outpost and the Antigonid troops within, breaking the landing from one side of the island. Soon after, Ptolemaic aid, in the form of 650 troops, entered through the blockade, reinforcing the defenders. As 304 BCE rolled around and Demetrios turned 32 years old, the king of Asia resolved to do one more land assault. Possibly using the remnants from Salamis, he ordered another construction of a helipolis, a giant siege tower. This tower was larger than the ones he had built before and was reinforced with iron front plates to avoid fire attacks. With this monumental achievement in ancient engineering, it was here that Demetrios truly became Polioketes, the besieger of cities. During the construction of the helipolis, the Rhodians scrambled to construct a second wall and reinforce their defences, while also sending their ships to attack enemy supply lines at sea. Multiple ramming assaults took place during the winter, resulting in the Rhodians securing supplies in the form of grain. As this was happening, Demetrios decided to play with fire. He took his team of sappers and began to construct tunnels underneath the outer walls. Upon realizing what was happening, the Rhodians began to dig their own counter-tunnels. As the battle was raging on top, the two tunnels ended up burrowing up against each other and an underground battle ensued. Meanwhile, Demetrios prepared for the ramming assault. He cleared the way for the helipolis, while also building up penthouses for his men to hide in while using battering rams. At some point during this siege, the Rhodians stockpiled their Ptolemaic-supplied ordnance, waited for a dark night without the presence of the moon goddess Selene, and then barraged the helipolis, damaging it severely but not fully disabling it. Some Athenians in the city tried to negotiate with Demetrios under a man called Athenagoras. Demetrios sent a man named Alexander the Macedonian to meet Athenagoras as a pretext to infiltrate the city, but the Athenian informed the Rhodians of this, who killed him on the spot. The catapults rained stones as the rams approached like massive boars, and the helipolis slowly moved forward by the force of 3,400 soldiers. Eventually, the combined assault collapsed the walls, which came crashing down and caused a Rhodian retreat. The victorious Antigonids passed through, coming face to face with the recently constructed inner walls. In order to break through the inner walls, Demetrius placed his most skilled general, Alkimos, in charge of 1,500 of his most elite troops and ordered them to conduct a night raid on the city. That night, Alkimos and the elite troops broke through into the city and moved inwards with relative ease, confident in their victory. However, as soon as they reached the theatre, the Rhodian defenders descended upon them with the vicious fury of men defending their hometown. After a long and bloody battle, all of the Antigonid troops were either dead or captured. The siege resumed as previously, with Demetrios growing angrier and more impatient than ever. It was here that a message was delivered to him. It was from Antigonos, who was fearful that the dragging out of the siege of Rhodes was severely damaging the Antigonids' reputation. Because of this, Antigonos ordered Demetrios to lift the siege. Despite still having a lot of resources at his disposal, Demetrios begrudgingly accepted and entered into negotiations with the Rhodians. The following settlement was reached. 1. Rhodes would be an autonomous and demilitarized city. 2. Rhodes would be exempt from tribute and continue trade freely. 3. Rhodes was to become an Antigonid ally except against Ptolemy. 4. 100 citizens were to be sent as hostages. With the deal secured, Demetrios sailed away, not defeated but repelled by a twist of geopolitics. Nevertheless, the Rhodians had defended their homes valiantly despite heavy losses. In the end, the Antigonids did not manage to conquer Rhodes, which was a major propaganda victory for the anti-Antigonid coalition. For the Rhodians, it was a massive success. According to Diadoros Sikelos, the victorious islanders liberated all the enslaved peoples who had fought by their side, as promised. They also built statues of Cassander and Lysimachos in their city. The most important honour, however, was saved for Ptolemy. The Rhodians sent their envoys to the Oracle of Amun, where Alexander was declared the son of Zeus, and asked about it possibly deifying Ptolemy. The oracle gave their blessing, and a large square in the city called Ptolemaeum was constructed, a mass complex where Ptolemy was worshipped as a god. This was not an uncommon practice. Indeed, Demetrios was also called a god by the Athenians. The other major legacy of the Siege of Rhodes was architecture, resulting in the construction of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. To commemorate their victory, the Rhodians decided to honour their patron deity, the god of the sun, Helios. Selling the Antigonid equipment left on their island for 300 talents, they instructed a local Rhodian, Chares of Lindos, to construct a massive statue on the site of the harbour. This statue was the famous Colossus of Rhodes, which stood at 33 meters tall. The statue greeted people in the harbour. It was a testament to the power of the sun and a monument for the Rhodians who had fought during their city's finest hour. And what of Demetrios? He was instructed to leave not just for the propaganda issues the siege was causing, but also because the political situation on the Greek mainland was changing. As we will remember from our last episode, many Greek city-states, like Athens, had aligned with the Antigonids, who claimed to be defending Hellenic freedom from the Macedonian garrisons. However, in retribution for this, Cassander laid siege to the city. This attack was going very badly for Athens, but the news of Demetrios making a landing at Chalkis in northern Attica caused Cassander to reconsider and conduct an orderly retreat. He began to move back towards Macedon, with Demetrios hot on his tail. The two armies ended up meeting in the Kallidromon mountain pass, where, after a battle, 6,000 Macedonians defected to join the cause of the ascendant Polyoketes. Cassander fled with his remaining troops, and his authority in Greece was now on shaky grounds. After this victory, Demetrios turned around and decided to secure his control over southern Greece. He moved down to the Peloponnese, where major Ptolemaic and Cassandrian garrisons were placed, and ordered a full-scale invasion of the Peloponnese. He expelled the enemy troops and then declared the freedom of all Hellenic polis. He was also declared commander of the Hellenes, invoking the pan-Hellenic ideal that Philip and Alexander utilized for their own control over Greece. Everyone to the south of Macedon, except for the ever-isolationist Spartans, accepted him. Demetrios also married a local Molossian princess, Diadomea, securing an alliance between Epiros and the Antigonids. Still licking his wounds, Cassander tried to negotiate for peace with Antigonos, but the one-eyed general demanded that he surrender completely. When the Antigonid reply reached Cassander in 303 BCE, he refused and called on Lysimachos, who was finally free of Thracian attacks. Lysimachos met with Cassander at Pella, and they both sent envoys to Ptolemy and Seleucus to strengthen the dynastic alliance against the combined Hellenic and Asiatic forces of the two saviour gods. Ptolemy accepted the messengers in Alexandria, gleefully obliged the plea for help, and began to prepare for an invasion of Sidon. But the envoys who were meant for Babylon arrived at an inopportune time, for Seleucus was in the east, and thus had to travel further east to reach him. Thus, the alliance against Antigonos was coming together, but it would take some time to be fully formed. However, when it did, it would make all of the eastern Mediterranean tremble. With the failure of the siege of Rhodes and the completion of the Colossus, the sun had finally set on one of the Antigonids' greatest military fumbles. Nevertheless, the Antigonid kingdom remained strong, still spanning all of Syria and Anatolia. However, their enemies were ready for their vengeance. The final battle of the Fourth War of the Diadochi was looming over the horizon, and it is this battle that will shift the fate of the Hellenistic world. To make sure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.